So, good morning, everybody. It's Sunday morning. Lizzie and I are here for Turning Towards Life. A couple of minutes late because we had a small technical difficulty this morning, which now looks like it's resolved. And I think I find myself saying this every time. I'm really thrilled to be doing this. And I realized this morning I'm thrilled to be doing this, not only because of the joy of speaking to Lizzie and knowing that what we have to say seems to be reaching out into the world in some way that's really meaningful. In fact, over the weekend, I got to speak to a few people who I didn't know were part of this, who were telling me about how it was affecting them, which was really lovely and moving. But I'm finding that getting to speak to Lizzie for half an hour on a Sunday morning is incredibly important. It's like our Sunday morning practice. So I'm very happy, Lizzie, that we're doing this morning, and I'm tremendously looking forward to this source that our very dear friend Joy Reichart has written for us.
Yeah, me too. I'm really happy to be here. We had a bit of a big party in our house last night, and so I've got some really dear old friends all kind of bunked in the rooms behind me, and I'm just noticing the gift of this kind of juxtaposition of doing this and then having an extremely fun, ordinary, hilarious time in my life, and having this in amongst it today just feels really representative, I think, of the way that it's turning out that my spiritual path is, which is this kind of mixture of the ordinary and extraordinary, and that those two things are kind of interchangeable for each of the things that I'm referring to. And me too, I'm just glad to be here, and also so glad to be bringing something that Joy has written. Her blog is so great. It's called Beginnerdom, and I'm sure you know the link that Justin's given us all, you can get to her blog that way. And she just writes extraordinary stuff, and she's just such a wonderfully lovely person. And Joy, I think you're listening because you said that in your post that you might listen to us. So Joy, thank you. And I so appreciate your presence in my life and the kind of person that you are when I see you, and the kind of embrace you always bring me, and the kind of conversations that we can have because of the background, the shared background we have. And I'm just thrilled that we can do this kind of thing, Justin, when we bring somebody that we love and that we talk about their work. And it's, yeah, I'm just really glad of this. And this conversation about fear is I think it's big for everybody, but certainly big for me. So I'm really happy to be doing this.
I'm going to say, Joy, if you're with us, I'm incredibly grateful for this. I emailed Joy on Thursday night late and said, can we use your writing, sort of already poised to put this out into the world, a few hours later? And you got back so quickly and so generously. So I'm really glad for you, and glad you're in the world. And most of all this morning, I'm glad that you're putting into the world what it is that you see and that you say, which I think, Lizzie, I know you and I have talked about this increasingly, that the world really needs what people have to say, particularly if you have something to say which cuts across, maybe that's exactly the opposite way that I want to say it, which reunites instead of divides, which turns us towards rather than away, between us, within us. There are so many voices active in the world at the moment which are intended to push us apart, which is exactly, in fact, Joy, what you've written about in this piece that we're going to read and share. And I feel such a fierce encouragement coming on these days to anyone who has something to say that can help to reunite in a truthful way. It can get us looking deeply and courageously at what it is that splits us apart, and to help us to undo that and to heal it. We need those voices in the world, and Joy's is one of those. So I think we should read.
Yes.
Okay. I am just trying to find Joy's wonderful writing. So this, one of the things for everyone who's watching is you can always find the source If you don't know where to find it, you can always find it in our Facebook group if you're part of that, but you can also always find it on the turningtowards.life website. So a little while before we speak on a Sunday, and then forever after we speak, we keep the links to the sources up. So you can find this one there if you want to find it now or later. And it's from Joy's website, Beginnerdom, her blog, and it's called Because I Was Scared. And it starts with a poem by Nikki Giovanni. I killed a spider, not a murderous brown recluse, nor even a black widow. And if the truth were told, this was only a small sort of papery spider who should have run when I picked up the book, but she didn't, and she scared me, and I smashed her. I don't think I'm allowed to kill something because I'm frightened.
Every bad thing I've ever done in my life, I did because I was scared. Everything I regret was born of fear. Fear of death, rejection, ridicule, fear of humiliation, fear of retribution, fear of getting hurt, fear of awkwardness or boredom or discomfort. Unconscious dread coiled deep in my core, built up over lifetimes. Current terrors burning lightly on the surface like a sheen of lighter fluid.
Everyone I've betrayed, every feeling I've disregarded, every morsel of kindness withheld, every time I've gossiped, every time I've lied, every act of selfishness, mindlessness, cruelty, every measure of harm to myself or others, every question not asked, every assumption made, every judgment cast, every rejection of intuition, every lapse in integrity. There have been so many. Every act of violence, every act of hate, every act of violence, every act of hate, because I was scared. I am scared.
I'm forgiving nobody in our moment in history, making excuses for no one, least of all myself. I'm just pointing out that we're all scared. We're all so damn scared. Imagine if we could accept and admit that, look into each other's eyes and souls and mutually acknowledge our wounds and our terror, and that all we've done and continue to do are warped attempts to feel safe. We act in ways we've learned that help us make sense of chaos and the dread.
I'm not calling for peace. Too late, too ancient, too moot. Fear began when humans began. It's nothing we can untangle in a moment, a day, a lifetime, a millennium. Kindness must be radicalized now, the volume on courage and sanity turned way, way up. Anger, worlds different from hate, expressed and heard. That's what's happening during this sea change, and that's the side I'm on. No way am I neutral on this.
At the same time, though, I pray to stay connected in every moment to the okayness of the greater surround. Not this earth. This earth is mortally wounded. Our fear has done this. Forgive us, Mother. But the infinite intelligence of all that is, aligning with that knowing that all is well, that all is love, and that there actually is no need to be afraid. There never was. Hey, don't worry, don't be afraid ever, because this is just a ride. Something Bill Hicks said.
I endeavour to recognise the fear behind the hate in everyone who hates and in every shameful action of my own. Try to ask questions instead of making judgments. Keep unearthing layers of my own fear, its roots, its origins, the age I was, or the lifetime I was in when it formed. Nurture that little being. Acknowledge her feelings and her fear. Shake and cry with her. Love her into maturity. Forgive. Try to see past the defenses and glimpse the terrified, vulnerable kid in whoever I look at, no matter how odious. Tall order. It's scary. I try.
And I'll join the mobs of good, brave, scared people marching out to stop ignorance from spreading. The immune system of our shared humanity rushing into the wound, triage, stabilize, and maybe one of these generations will be well enough to begin healing for real.
It's quite something, hey? I read all of that. One of the one thing I'm really appreciating about Joy's writing here is the acknowledgement that we're all afraid, and that fear is one of these. We've talked about a number of these as we've gone on, Lizzie. Well, it's certainly true that I'm afraid so often, and I see and so much of what Joy's written myself, particularly the part that struck me very strongly this morning is every act of betrayal, every judgment, all the gossip, all of the pushing people away, that clear and courageous list that she has in the midst of this, all comes from fear. And I know that to be true in myself, that that much of the time there's a part of me that's enormously afraid that I don't always tell people about. And I certainly, I have learned to tell people about it more and more these days, but I certainly don't often tell people about it when I'm caught in it. So I've learnt when I'm not so gripped by it, when I'm not in the midst of some kind of gossip or judgment or, you know, all of those things, to be able to talk about being afraid like I am now. But really the hardest point is when I'm in the midst of something that in one way I know that I'm acting way at odds with what I care about, when I'm acting in a destructive way, and that's when I'm most afraid, and that's when it's most difficult to say, hey, I'm afraid, which would be the liberation from it. It would be like in all the old fairy stories where you name the demon and its power is taken. That's the most difficult moment to do it.
Yeah, I'm noticing, Justin, as you're saying that and just feeling into the experience of reading and listening to Joy's words, it really is quite something for a human being to admit they're afraid rather than just stick to the thing that they feel strongly about. You know, we're so invested in the safety that Joy speaks of. And so, of course, in that moment when you're most afraid, like to say, I'm afraid rather than I hate you or something, you know, or act in a way, like you say, gossiping or judging or lashing out or withdrawing. I mean, there's so many ways that overlaid are a cover for fear or a response to fear. And it's quite something to have the awareness to know that fear generates these reactions. And I think that's a really powerful bit that Joy wrote for me, is like, what if we could look each other in the eye and acknowledge all this and feel safe enough in relationship, looking one another in the eye, to admit these things, where the person in front of us isn't in a fear state and therefore not going to judge us for being the people that we are because of the resulting action that came from fear. And that's really huge. It's really huge, you know, in myself, like, what is it when I'm being defensive or I'm holding on to a point in my relationships and I've got an opinion or a stand that I'm taking that's like, no, this is right, this is what I think, and you're wrong. It feels so like there's so much at stake to say, actually, I'm just frightened here. You know, like the ego, the personality is so invested in the righteousness, and it's like fighting for its survival. So like fear is in some way how we've learned to survive, to be safe, to act out of there. At least I'm in control. You know, at least I've got some kind of semblance of getting a grip on this thing. And then to surrender and say, actually, I'm noticing I'm really frightened, is a huge thing. Because also what happens at that point is that the other person gets included in your world, which when you're in a fear state and you're attacking or judging or being really defensive or really controlling, you're not actually in relationship with either the world or the people that are involved in the situation, let alone in relationship, compassionately anyway, to yourself. So to step down into this place that Joy is inviting us to and go, I can see that when I said that I was frightened. I can see that when I acted that way, I was really scared. It feels like a big invitation and such an important one for our world, because there is so much fear. And yet I can feel the bigness of the ask that this is. As you say, in the moment, it's so difficult to step off the box of fear and share with someone when we're acting out, when we're in the midst of a defense or a control or something that's happening. So I just feel really kind of invited, and I feel like there's like a call to action. Joy's writing feels like it's this really big, dynamic call to our own self-awareness, our own self-admission, our own being honest to the depth that we might not be used to ordinarily in our culture. That takes faith and trust that on the other side of that, there is something else other than our control and our defense and our maneuvering. Something else lives as us and for us that we can trust into in the letting go and the honesty that she's asking of us.
This is one, we've had a number of conversations like this, Lizzie, over recent weeks, and it seems to me this is another example in a fresh form, which is where the move, the radical move, the move that in the end is the one that's healing and also liberating of our own capacity to be in relationship with one another, to fix things up, to take care of things, is to turn into our fear rather than away from it.
Yeah.
Is that you can only do this by being willing to take a step in and being willing to say first to ourselves and then to others, I am afraid.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we have to know that we're afraid. And part of the trouble I think that we have here is that fear is, for all the reasons that you say, hides itself, or we don't know it. We don't know it most immediately as fear. We know it as I have to be right, or we know it as I have to smash you, as in that extraordinary poem at the start by Nikki Giovanni. I have to smash you, and we don't get that it's fear that's behind everything. And that's one of the reasons I think writing like Joy's and maybe this conversation is important, because we start to learn what fear is by talking with other people and hearing other people talk about what fear is for them, and being able to go, oh my, that's so, I'm afraid too.
Yeah.
I'm afraid. And when we can say, I'm afraid, we don't have to wait anymore. We have to stand on the edge of it, hoping it will go away, or hoping that we can keep it under by all of the ego activity that you're talking about, or all of the being right.
Yeah.
We can leap into it, which is paradoxically leaping off. There's this amazing photograph, and I'll try and remember who the French artist is who made this photograph. It's of a man. He's just leapt off the like the parapet of his house. He's not jumping to hurt himself. It's really clear from the picture. He's leaping into space.
Yeah.
Beautiful picture. And that leap where we think nothing will hold us, where we think this will be the end of all of it. And I mean the metaphorical leap, the emotional leap, the leap into the truth of feeling afraid is the one that Joy's writing calls us into. And it's not, I'm coming to see from this conversation and from my own experience and from what Joy writes, actually it's not optional. If we want to turn the direction of things, we have to be prepared to leap into our fear, and then we have to also be able to practice more and more in the moment of being afraid, saying I'm afraid.
Yes.
Right when I want to yell at you, right when I want to prove my rightness. That's the moment when we get to that, and we can say to the person who we've made into another, who we're pushing ourselves away from, who we're not in a relationship, to say, I'm afraid, let me be in relationship with you. And then maybe the other person also gets the chance to say, I'm frightened too.
And Justin, this is so like so much feels possible that's different than patterns that repeat themselves if this was to be manifest in our world and relationships. And it's making me think, like, one thing that often happens is that I get kind of indignant about someone, and I say, well, that's just really bad behavior, or people shouldn't be like that, or how dare somebody speak to someone like that. And Matthew, my husband Matthew, often says, he has a very fine, I think, tuning fork for fear. And he often says, Lizzie, I think they might be frightened. I'm like, don't be ridiculous. They're not frightened. That's just really bad behavior. And I get very kind of, I guess I get really judgmental about people being mean to other people. I get, I feel I need to step in sometimes. And I think, well, this isn't okay. And someone needs to, defend the underdog and whatever. And having him say to me, Lizzie, I think they're frightened, has always been something that, it kind of pisses me off on one hand, because I'm like, don't go there. I need to hold somebody to account. But of course, there's the really honest part of me, which Joy is calling us towards, which is, well, of course. But if I hadn't been able to recognize myself as frightened, it would be so hard for me to even allow that concept in, that someone else was frightened, and therefore that's why they're acting that way. And so, as always, the work begins here with this one, which is, what does it take for me in the midst of an argument where I think I'm right to step off my soapbox and say I'm afraid? And therefore, how does that help me then respond to somebody who's on their soapbox and really respond to the deeper thing that's happening, which is that they're afraid? And I'm getting really curious in the moment of what I could say and have as my practice, as you're saying, Justin, that might not be the same thing I would always say, because I'm responding to the fear, not responding to the content. And that maybe I could say something like, it's okay. We're okay. There's nothing at stake here. I'm here, or something, in response to whatever I'm probably being told off for because I haven't done something right or whatever. And or if it's happening between other people as well, how might I be an intervener to say, well, I think there's some fear here. I think there's some afraidness that might be underneath. And how even the possibility of doing that comes from my own inner work, of really acknowledging in the way that Joy is saying. Because before I can do any of that, to acknowledge the source of my behavior, the source of my feeling as fear, feels like the kind of, if we haven't taken that step, really so little as possible.
Right. I agree that even in the example that you're talking about, where somebody is acting in a violent way towards us in words or in deed, and we want to say to them, stop, this isn't okay, which has to be able to be said whenever there's violence being done. In order to do that in the way that you say, which is to get that there's so much fear in this, even if what we want to say is something more than just I'm afraid, is please don't do this, you have to stop this. Even if we want to do that, we have to make this radical move that you're talking about, which is to be in contact with and honest about our own fear and how the other person might be afraid as well.
Yeah.
And I'm really touched by the implication, something you said, and I don't remember exactly the words that you just said this, but which is that in order to be able to do this in the midst of something happening, whether it's in a personal relationship or whether it's in politics or whether it's, so many people will be watching us from the US where this awful situation in school in Florida has been unfolding and so many people are afraid. In order to be able to respond to any of that, it helps us to be in a practice of turning towards our fear again and again and again, just in the midst of everything else, not right when we're in the heat of the most frightening thing. And in a way, the good news about it is that most of us are afraid enough. I mean this in a sort of parody in a way,
we've all got fodder.
We've all got, right, we all have enough. And the Bill Hicks quote at the end of this, one of the ways that I'm understanding it right now as we're talking about is it's actually not to do with not feeling fear. It would be a real mistake to take the invitation to not be afraid as I should never feel fear. Actually, the first move for us is to not be afraid of our own fear. And this is, I've been finding this out more and more about myself, which is part of what makes this hard to work with, is I'm so afraid of contact with my own fear. I can be so afraid that I don't want to turn into it. I don't want to admit it. If I really felt how afraid I am, if I really owned up to how afraid I am then, and some other set of consequences. So it's like fear is wrapped in fear. There's multiple layers of it. And when I have learned to turn towards the afraid part of me, and this has helped me so much, so many times, because I feel so much fear in my body so often, particularly when I wake up in the morning, and it's been going for a long time, this feeling of feeling afraid, that when I can treat the afraid part of me, as Joy says, like a small, young part of me that is still afraid of something from long ago, I can be compassionate towards the part of me that's afraid and say, I know you're afraid. And I'm here. I'm right here with you, and I'm afraid too. And we can be in this together. We can be afraid in this together. And I don't run in fear from the part of me that's afraid. Then I've got beginning to have a chance to do this. That's the beginning. And that's the practice that makes it possible now and again, in the midst of when I might otherwise be raging or something, to do what you've just said, which is to catch it. But it's, at least as far as I can tell, it's built by a sort of fierce dedication and a kindness to our own practice on and on and on over time.
And as you're speaking, I can feel the vulnerability. Like I literally feel vulnerable now. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the moments of turning towards that fear and admitting I'm frightened. Like there's so many, I think, kind of connotations around fear of weakness and vulnerability and uselessness. And well, if I was to say I was fearful, I would be, it just feels vulnerable. It feels exposed. It feels like I don't have the normal kind of tools I have to kind of make everything okay for myself. Like I just can feel so much of the personality that I have is building protection into everything all the time. Like I'm like a kind of expert protection builder, an expert defender. And to really turn towards that and gentle myself in to just, I'm really frightened and that's why I'm being bolshy, or that's why I'm being defensive, or that's why I'm feeling righteous about something. It's like it takes a lot of letting go, and it also, I think, takes a cultivation in the not fear. As in, if I'm in the inquiry as to the deeper identity of me, and as Joy's pointing to, that the all that is, if I'm cultivating my relationship to the all that is, dedicating my practice to experiencing being and the nature of being, and letting that infiltrate me when I'm not afraid, it feels like I give myself at least a landing pad when fear has got me and I need to let it go. I've got somewhere to land because I've cultivated some relationship with the all that is. that allows me to do that with some grace, that allows me to do that with some faith, because I've got a relationship with the nothingness, with what feels like nothingness, which is probably the everythingness. And if I'm not doing that and I'm letting go, it's too frightening. It really is. And so this deeper question of identity and the truth and the true nature of what a being is really, really feels like it has to be present. This as Joy says, she prays to the greater surround. There's just such beautiful language for that. And the infinite intelligence of all that is, and aligning with that, cultivating that, so that when I have to drop my defenses, drop control, drop all the ways I maneuver the world to keep me safe, there's something waiting for me that I know because I've felt it. That feels like a deep indicator of the probability of me being able to let go in the moment, because I know that my agenda is not the only thing that is real to me. There's something else that is real to me, which is this all that is, the love, the infinite intelligence, as Joy says, the greater surround, and that we can cultivate our connection to that, so that in these moments we have something, we have some faith, we have a sense of the not known, not felt, but we can kind of bring it close so that it doesn't feel like so much is at stake when we step off of our soapbox or give in, because it really isn't important anymore what I think about how the knives should be lined up in the cutlery drawer. You know, that I can actually go, because I think it is small things like that. Like some things are big fears, but most of us live in domestic partnership somehow with someone, with children or partners or whatever. You know, when you really look at it, all of, like, so many arguments happen around the smallest teensy little things. And it really does take quite a lot to let go of the way that somebody should do the washing, or the way that somebody should load the dishwasher. I mean, I'm notorious, by the way, of loading the dishwasher, and people reload it after I've done it, just as a personal domestic admission. But, you know, I have been on the end of, like, the I think fearful response, the controlling response, to all those domestic things. And so, as you said, Justin, we've got fodder. You know, there are opportunities for us to practice with this all the time. And I'm feeling particularly interested in this right now. You know, particularly like, oh, I can go and practice in the kitchen. I could go and see what I can let go of in terms of the way I think things should be happening in the world, and what's there waiting for me.
This is so necessary and beautiful, this attention you're drawing to the bigger surround that we're all part of, that Joy talks about brilliantly at the end of this piece.
Yeah.
And in one way you could, one of the books that I really love about, there's a book called Fear by Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher, in which he says, I think rightly, and this is sort of the flip side of what you're saying, that all our fears boil down to, in one way or another, fear of our own death. You know, fear that something that we can't deny in the end, that we'll grow old. However long we live, we're always growing older, that our bodies will fail us, we'll get ill, we'll die, we'll lose all the relationships we have. And he says really very beautifully, until you can start to turn towards that, or once you start turn towards that, then working with our other fears, we start to see how all of our other fears lead to this place. And it's our avoidance of feeling that traps us. And that's what makes us afraid of, you know, anyone who's in the UK, or maybe many other people around, will know that we're in a big political thing about what's going to happen about the identity of this country in relation to Europe. And I know that the fear that I get about it is actually, when I sit down and look at it, it's the fear of annihilation. It's the fear of everything will be lost.
Yeah. When
I get afraid there. So Thich Nhat Hanh says you have to turn towards those fears. And the reason I'm saying it now is that the such deep kindness and necessariness of what you're saying is in order to turn towards those, we also have to see that we're not on our own, and we never were, that that what we came from into the world, the mystery that we came into the world from, pre-existed us. The world pre-existed us.
Yeah.
We're part of something way, way bigger than just us, and the world will continue after us.
Mm.
And in a way, that can be a really profound way of working with our fear, is to see that, and this is maybe also what Joy and Bill Hicks are saying, is to trust there are facts about the world that we can't change. We can't change those basic fears that Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about. We can't change that we'll die and our bodies will fail and all of those things. But what we can change is our understanding of what that is.
Mm.
And as in those moments where we can grasp this, it's okay. Actually, everything's okay. This has been going on forever.
Yeah.
This has been part of the nature of human existence and of existence since there has been an existence, is that things rise and things disappear, and this will happen to me and everyone I love. And it's terrifying, and it's okay. And it's the finding the okayness in it without pretending not to be afraid.
Yes.
There's one of the great increasing inspiration for me, and I will probably bring a source from him at some point. I think I've mentioned him before, is Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who was around in the 17th century, and he lived in really difficult circumstances, and he has this beautiful saying which just echoes Bill Hicks that I wanted to slip in before we finish, is the whole world is a very narrow bridge which starts in one kind of mystery and ends in another kind of mystery. And the most important thing is not to be afraid. And I love that for its honesty, which is that we're always walking on this trepidatious bridge from which we could fall at any point, and to deny that would be foolishness.
Yeah.
And at the same time, let's find a way to not be afraid in the midst of it, which doesn't mean not feeling afraid. It's in a bigger sense not being afraid, so that we can walk together.
Yeah. It's funny, just as I was reading Bill Hicks, I was thinking, I hope Justin says that thing about, I can't remember his name, I call him Rachmaninoff in my head, but I know
Rachmaninoff of Bratslav. Rabbi Rachmaninoff of
Nachman, sorry.
Nachman.
Same as Rachmaninoff in my mind.
That's right. It's the same.
So I'm really glad that you shared that. It's really beautiful, and I'm so glad of this conversation. I feel like enlivened and inquiring and in hope and glad, and so grateful to Joy for your articulation and the kind of language and poetry that you bring to this topic. It's really amazing.
Thank you so much, Lizzie.
Oh, thank you, Justin.
We do this, and thank you to everyone who's watching. We are so glad you're with us, and I have a small request, which is if you are with us and you can muster the possibility of sharing how this work is touching you and affecting you, maybe in the comments in our Facebook group, if you're a member of the Facebook group. It's so it's such a support for us for what we're doing, but I'm actually asking for a bigger reason, which is I know that when we share with one another how we're being touched and affected by something, it helps other people too.
Yeah.
So of course, that's not the only way to participate in this. You can just turn up and watch and listen, and you never have to say anything, and that's absolutely fine. But we'd be so thrilled to hear from you how this is going and what you're seeing and feeling and knowing as a result of this work.
Yeah.
And tell people what we're up to as well. Have people you love join in. That would be such a gift for everyone too.
And also just to say thank you for everybody who clicked on our YouTube channel, because we now have our link, which I posted before, and we have 112 followers or subscribers on our YouTube channel. So that's really, really wonderful, because I think YouTube reaches the world in a bit of a different way, and it just is amazing and Justin does this amazing thing where when we do these things, he then uploads things in different places and does all this technological stuff that means we have a presence online, and I think in 3 different places. So Facebook, YouTube, and then our website, which is turning towards .life. And so, yeah, we have an existence in the online plane, and it's really exciting, and I'm really glad of it.
So we will see you all next Sunday morning.
We certainly will.
Thank you for being with us.
Bye, folks.
Bye.